Today we're talking about democratizing content. What the heck does that mean? It is the idea that anybody can do video, and we think that video podcasting makes that so much easier for folks who might be nervous or have never done it before. I am sitting today here with Shea Durant, just an absolute creative shooter, editor, kind of the brains and brawn behind this podcast studio that we're sitting in. A lot of the design from the technical and aesthetics came from Shea. Thank you, Shea. Yep. And I'm here with Danielle Cardona, our producer. It feels like not as much of a...
That's okay. I didn't build the podcast studio, so it's only fair.
That's fair, right. Our esteemed producer here. So, and today we're talking about how video podcasting, we believe, makes it easier to create content, especially if you haven't done anything like this before. I think the first thing before we get into that is one of the big values of creating content in this format is the gravitas, right? Is that it just sets you up to look and feel like an expert, and it kind of puts that expertise at the front form. And so, Danielle, we had an example of how we use this for Philly Friendship Circle. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for that concept, we worked with 4 different individuals within the organization in completely different roles. And the concept was to position them as they are experts in their role and what they do every day within Friendship Circle. And when we were thinking about the best way to bring their expertise and their stories to light, we thought about our podcast studio. What better way, what better place to have them come in, sit down in the setting that we really wanted to showcase what they do on their everyday basis that makes their events and their programs so successful.
And really quick, from a strategic perspective, the fundraising goal there, right, for Philly Friendship Circle and how they were getting more people to give money in the room, which is the overall objective of the video, was to say, hey, look at these experts. Let's share some of their stories and expertise, right? But as a result of that, there's an implied understanding. The podcast studio implies expertise in that gravitas that we talked about. The fact that there's 4 experts sitting and talking about their psychological background, their education background and stuff, that implies money. There's cost to hire these people to do the great work they do. And so for the people in the audience in the room, they get that dual benefit. Hey, these look like experts. They are experts. And also that expertise costs money. So we should probably give more money to this nonprofit to help them to continue to move forward. So it was a really nice strategy. I love that idea that you had to bring them in here. And I think it went really well. But the other benefit was they were all comfortable on camera. So talk a little bit about, I know in particular, some of them had come to us and said that they'd never done anything like this before and they were nervous about being on camera. That might resonate with folks. So what did you see when we brought them on the set?
Sure. That's a concern that we see all the time when we are talking to someone and we bring up the idea of possibly interviewing them on camera. First thing they do is they kind of take a step back and they get a little nervous and they ask questions. They want to make sure they're looking the right way, dressing the right way, saying the right things. And I think bringing them in, and instead of it being a one-on-one and having the 4 of them, 4 people that they all know one another, establish that comfortability. But then the setting here between the cameras that we have that are already set up right when they come in the door, so they don't have, all of this extra time to kind of overthink everything, already set up, and they're small. So they, like a traditional on location set where we're bringing in gear and tripods and lights and all of these things. In our podcast studio, the cameras are small. You almost don't even really feel like you're being recorded. And then we also have a whole separate room for our team behind a door so that we can still monitor everything. We can provide that real-time feedback without feeling like there's 4, 5, 6 eyes right on you.
Right. We can actually hear December right now giving us the time, how long this episode's run, right, in the background. And so I think that's a great transition to you, Shea, being behind the design here a lot, and the choices around the small cameras, the way this has been positioned, the technical director station back there. So talk about the intentional design that we had here with the space and how you feel that facilitates making it easier for folks that maybe haven't done video before or have struggled in the past.
Sure. Yeah. So I think I find myself to be very similar to a lot of people that we might be working with, is that I prefer to be behind the camera. I don't like being in front of the camera, but all the choices that were made in the studio were designed to make it easier for people to be on camera, feel more comfortable. One of them is the just a lot of the gear that we chose. We picked smaller cameras to make it a little bit easier. You're not, you don't have a big camera with a big lens right in your face. You have these small cameras. You don't have clients and extra eyes on you. Like Danielle said, it makes it a little bit easier to. You don't feel all that stress of other people looking at you because they're in the other room. The overall design is just comfortable. It's sound deadening. The microphone and the headphones work together, so you sound good on camera, and you almost forget about everything else that's happening because it's really so isolated here. So that was a big part about just designing the studio in a way that you're thinking about the conversation we're having and not all the other things that are happening behind the scenes, which makes it a lot easier.
And I think conversations are the key, right? I think that when we do an interview, let's say it's a 2-camera interview where you're looking off at the director and they're asking you questions, you're still on your own, right? You're still in front of the camera. Everybody else is on the other side. There's shooters. There's maybe a sound person. There's the support folks on the client side, and then you're just isolated in this, island, having to deliver content with everybody watching you. It can be nerve-wracking, and I think that here we're just talking to one another, and I find the second people stop doing this and looking here and look to here, you immediately get the benefit and that impact of just we're having a conversation, right?
It's much more conversational, and it becomes a team sport. It's not like you're, like you said, on your own in an island, so it makes it a lot easier.
I like that part. I do think that there's a cost to it, right? Like we always have to talk about the pros and the cons of things, and one of the things that just came up for me is duration, right? So in the example that we talked about earlier with you, Danielle, around Philly Friendship Circle and how we use this strategically for their event, most people expect a video podcast. A podcast might be 10 minutes, it could be 30 minutes, an hour, right? But in that case, we had to craft something that was under 3 minutes, under 2 minutes, right, for the gala. And video podcasting, that's one of the downsides that people should know, is that because it's conversational, there's going to be more time. There's going to be time for me to ask the question, right, which was in a traditional environment I wouldn't do. You wouldn't hear in the video, it'd be edited out. And then there's time for the response, right, and sort of that back and forth. So you're more conversational, you're more comfortable, right? But then you have to think about the content side, that those episodes are going to be inherently longer. So I would say, and either you can kind of run with this and take it, because I know, Shea, you've had a lot of experience on the Subaru podcast that we produce, these training video podcasts where they need to be under 10 minutes, but we might have an episode that records for 30, right? So what do you guys suggest, or what are some things that people can take away in terms of expectation setting? And like, if you're going to choose this format, it's going to be easier to record, but there might be more work on the post-production side and where we can add value there.
I think, being able to have so many decisions in your narrative is both a pro and a con. It's a pro because now, you have all of this content where maybe you can repurpose it. Maybe you can use it in different ways, and you only had to sign up for one recording session and you walk away with all of this content. It can be a con if you really only have one video you're trying to make, you're trying to keep it within 3 minutes, you record for 30 minutes, and there's just too many options, too many great lines that you want to keep in, and you have to make that decision of what is most important. So I think the biggest takeaway I would say for clients that are coming in is set your goals. Work with us to set your goals of what are you trying to accomplish, what are the key messages you're trying to portray, and try to keep it as tight as you can, because honestly, in a podcast setting, it's very easy to have 3 bullet points and completely riff for 30 minutes. It's just natural because it is more conversational. So I think it's always good to have more topics in the back of your mind, but coming in with very strict, precise goals is super helpful.
And then, Shea, on the post-production side, right, because you're responsible a lot of time for the editing, what are some things that either on the expectation side or things that you do on the technical side to facilitate that process for clients?
I think it helps a lot of our team that's doing the technical directing, including myself, know the back end. What is this used for? How long does it need to be? And we can help direct client through the headphones, so you're not actually hearing them talk. We're only hearing them. It's not in the edit.
Yep.
And it helps us really direct the conversation. If something goes too long, we can help them shorten it up. And we've also done versions where they go for 30 minutes and they're like, hey, we really need this down to 10 minutes. Okay, let's do a really quick 10-minute cut, and then I'm splicing them together to create that story. So there's a couple different ways that we can do that.
And I would say that's the benefit of the podcast studio too. And you are at a traditional on-location set, you have 2 or 3 cameras. So you have a couple, typically about 2 camera angles that you can cut between, and you're kind of cutting back and forth. Here you have 7 camera angles. So if you do need to cut down the narrative, it is usually very simple for us to be able to chop it up in a way that is intentional and doesn't look like it was a cut that we cut something completely out. We're able to cut to different angles so it is covered up, and no one in the audience or no one that's viewing your video would say, that sounds like it was just like a cut made for time.
Well, it's funny. I think that the big part of that, and I think that's a phenomenal point. I think, Shea, to your point with getting like a 30-minute episode down to 10, it comes down also to expertise in storytelling. And I think one of the things that I always find pride and so much enjoyment in working with everyone on our team is that we all understand each aspects of the production process, from the pre-production process, production, and post. And so all of that falls under this umbrella of storytelling. And so in that example where we got to carve something down, when you focus your story more, then you know what you can filter out, right? And so the podcast environment in that space, yes, you're going to generate more content up front because inherently how conversations flow. But I've seen you cut a 30-40 minute recording down to 10 minutes. We've cut them down to 4 minutes and still gotten all the pertinent information there when there's been a requirement from the client, like, hey, this duration needs to be shorter. So I think that it kind of goes back to that whole thing that is really our mantra, right? Which is, you shouldn't have to hold our hand too much through the process. There is information that we're going to need, and there's expectations that we're going to set. But what I love seeing is when a client comes in and they're like, what the heck do I do with this big slab, And it's like, just give us your main goal and some of the key messages to support that. We'll get it down to that duration for you. And I think using the camera angles, using the setting, using all of those pieces, we can really bring together something that works well, regardless of the environment, whether it's training, marketing, and this environment. I love it for that reason, because ultimately it democratizes content, which is what we talked about at the beginning. Just makes it easier for folks that may not have as much camera readiness, may have never done this before. It opens the doorway for more folks to share their expertise, talents, and abilities in a video format. Shea, thanks so much. Danielle, this was awesome. If you guys like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any experiences that you've had with video content creation, good, bad, or otherwise, comment below and share those thoughts. I'd love to hear the impact it's had on you. Thanks.